Hello, everyone. My name is Nico, and I would like to take you on a grand adventure through the inner workings of my horribly broken mind. And I just realized the title of this video is going to spoil everything, so let's just get into it, shall we? Today, what I want to talk about is some hardcore nerd shit. That's right, some Dungeons and Dragons. Oh, did you hear that? Anyway, I'm not going to edit this because I don't care. I'm too lazy. Um, so, for the inaugural episode, what I would like to talk about first is DMing. Possibly one of the most nerve wracking and intimidating jobs in role playing today. But with a little bit of forethought, it is quite easy to do, especially if you have a vague understanding of the rule set. About 6 months, or sorry, about a year ago, I ran a campaign that was roughly 6 to 7 months long with a group of friends, and I would like to show you my DM journal. This is my journal. The first page of the journal is the world map I drew. The second page of the journal is the first town they started in. And every other page after that is nothing. That is correct. I did an entire 6 to 7 month campaign all off the top of my head. And how I did this was very simple. I really like older sci-fi and fantasy. I like retro video games in general, but I find I gravitate more towards like older stuff. And movies, huge movie buff. At least I was before I got married and had a kid. Worked at Hollywood Video for a year. And I think in that year, I watched every single movie in that place that I could. But through all of this, what I was able to do was just kind of generate I crafted an entire world based off the things that I like. The rule set we used was 5th edition. All I had at the time was the starter set, and I had access to the monster manual that they released in PDF form because I believe it was free or something. But that's all I used when I needed to make like a custom monster or something. Because one of the things that we did was I recreated the entire mansion from Resident Evil 1, miniaturized version. They weren't like going through the basement and doing like everything from the game. But what I did do was I created the main floor, the second floor, and I made a third floor, and I threw some puzzles in there, ripped some wholesale from the game, mind you. But I made these floors. I made them all on foam core, gussied them up a little bit. I didn't put a hell of a lot of effort into it because, as with my editing skills, I got lazy. So I just stripped some pieces, glued it together, created a room, and then just weaved a story off that because I love Resident Evil. Resident Evil 2 was one of my favorite games growing up. Probably played it when I was a little too young. Thanks, Mom. So that's what I did. I built an entire session off of a game that I happen to really love. And the whole basis for the story was a song, actually. Well, maybe not a song, but an entire album. So one of the bands I used to listen to was Protest the Hero. And they had an album called Kazaya. And what I really liked about the album was it was an entire story told through, I think it's like 10 to 12 tracks with 2 interludes between. And something about it just got the juices flowing up in my head. And it's like, there's something. It's a story about a woman. It's a story about a woman who is imprisoned and in death row, corrupt clergyman in the prison, and the officer who was put in place to kill her. And what I did was I crafted this entire story based off of the woman whose name in the story was Kazaya. What I used her as was a time goddess. So what I put my players through was they were all soldiers during World War II who were stationed at a prison camp. or they were stationed at like a military prison, and I think I said it in Italy. And I had them go through a really bare bones, like there wasn't a lot of rules. It was just throw some dice and just get shit done. And they role played through this prison. I think one of my players killed her for some reason, and that sort of kicked off one branch of the story. And mind you, I hadn't written anything for this. I just had an idea. Okay, if they do X, we'll go and do Y. But they threw a wrench in. They decided, like, one guy decided to be a murder hobo, so he just offs her. So it's like, okay, I can work with that. Stuck that in the back of the Rolodex. So they get back from the war. They decided to join the mafia because they were all Italian. And they were planning a bank heist. I gave them 30 minutes. They like chatted between each other and started planning a heist. It was kind of one of those moments where you're watching a heist movie and you're like, yo man, I so want to be the person. I want to be the fly in that room, or one of these guys just being like, yeah, well, we'll do this. We'll go in through the back and we'll blah, da, 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 da. So they plan out this heist, and I thought it was amazing. So I said, cool. They rolled some dice. I wasn't doing jack shit. I was just letting them go through it because their plan was pretty solid. So everything went according to plan. They get back to a bar to talk about the score. The next thing you know, rival gang comes in and just mows everybody down. And then once they died, they were greeted by Keziah, the woman they killed in that prison. And from there, they were essentially transported to the game of Dungeons and Dragons. So what I did was I started out with just a bullshit gameplay, like a bullshit gameplay story. It was all about the build-up. So I built up this story because they were all thinking, oh, we're playing Dungeons and Dragons, sword and board wizardry and all that. But no, I pulled the rug out from under them. And sometimes that's what you need. You want to entice your players and get them to stay, whether that be through surprises, through comedy, through horror. The best way that I find that I do it is I like to gauge the players that I'm with and kind of like take little bits and pieces of their personality and things that they like and throw them in. Case in point, one of the guys in the group loves heist movies. So I was like, okay, cool, let's do a heist. One of the guys really likes like otherworldly planar stuff. So it's like, okay, cool. We'll set him in the real world, and then they're going to get transferred to. I used the basis of the Minds of Phandelver. So here's the biggest thing: I cannot stand reading from a book. I can read a book. I sit down and read a book all day. However, when it comes to playing a game based off of a book, to me, it seems like cheating. Mind you, I know that's not everybody's idea, but for me, I think it's cheating because I don't. In my opinion, it makes me personally feel like I don't have control over the narrative. So you go through the story as the book writes it. And the problem I find with that is I don't have a lot of choice in deviating it because players are always going to do different things. So for me, having to change the story and then bring it back just doesn't feel right. So I'm a huge believer in homebrewing a story. And like I said, you just find a couple things that you as the DM enjoy and build your story around that. Like by the end of the game, they were in a castle chasing after the big bad, and I had no idea what I was going to do to end this game. So my first thought was, hey, it would be kind of interesting. The what was it, Bad Wolf from Doctor Who. Or no, maybe it wasn't the Bad Wolf thing. It was the rips in time and space. Because like the whole thing was Keziah was a time goddess. So I figured, well, if she's being sacrificed to if these demigods are trying to kill her, wouldn't it make sense that while they're torturing her, like rips in time and space would be happening? So I kind of used that, and it worked out for one of my players because he was legitimately like creeped out by one of the monsters that came through the hole, because it was a half man, half lobster. And he like pops through and he's doing his little like thing, and I had everybody glitch out. So he would be like, "You're not supposed to be here." And then like he would answer in his character, and I just like I kept leaning closer into him. So I like to kind of like I like to get my players into it by kind of like role playing it a little harder. So like I'll kind of lean close, maybe do little whispers and stuff like that. I don't really use props, again, laziness. But that was one of the things. Like he got so into it where he was like, I'm done, I'm out. He like ran out of the part of the castle he was in, and like he was doing some like perception checks and stuff, and he noticed like one of the maidens that was cleaning the tables. She kept cleaning this one spill over and over again, and she'd keep glitching out. Like she would keep like popping back and forth. And they get up to the top of this tower. They have their big showdown with the big bad, who I think honestly I just ripped off. I made Morgoth from the Silmarillion, just the bad guy. Made him a little less kind of timid. But yeah, I pretty much just use Morgoth because he's such a cool character. But I was like, okay, let's do that. And like some of his disciples, I actually drew this out, but I recreated the members of Slipknot as demigods. Because again, I grew up with nu metal, so I was like, Slipknot. I know Slipknot. They got cool masks. Wonder if I could actually draw some of those and actually make them look cool. So that's what I did. So it's all about using what you know and what you have an interest in to generate your whole world. Because like I said, my DM book is empty. I have a tinier one in here that maybe has like 10, 20 NPCs tops. I don't even think I have it anymore. Yeah, I don't even have those notes anymore. I had a little tiny notebook that had a couple of NPCs that I was like, okay, when they're in this town, this is the NPC. Like, I created one guy who was Manny Garcia. He was an arms dealer in whatever town they were in. I think I just made it Neverwinter and then changed it because I didn't remember what Neverwinter looked like, and I really didn't want to find a map, so I just made my own. No, it was I called it Portsmouth. That was the name of the town. Anyway, I digress. So while they were in Portsmouth, there was a weapons shop because, you always got to have an item shop. It was run by Manny Garcia. It was Manny's Arms, I think was the name of the place. However, what I did was I made a little interesting rule. When they were in there, after about like 5 to 6 minutes, I'd have everybody roll perception checks. And anybody who failed would not notice that everything changed. So Manny would change to Garcia Manny. He would be in more of like an alchemist's robes, and the store would change from Manny's Arms to Manny's Martial Arms, that was the name, to Manny's Alchemic something. Again, this is a while ago. But yeah, and again, it was a change the rules, because there's nothing in the book that I know of that does that. And they were so interested in it, so I kind of kept that. And by the end of it, I'm butchering the story right now, but at the end of it, Manny Garcia was actually like another part of one of these demigods who was trapped because Keziah was essentially just being perpetually tortured for eons. And yeah, they liked the story, and that was kind of it. And now I'm DMing a new one, which was based off a one-shot I did, and that's the Herald of Ruin. It's based off a one-shot I did maybe 2 years ago, using Microlight 20. Again, another simple, basic D20 system. Really easy to learn, really easy to bullshit. Oh, it's awesome. I love it. But yeah, I've been, for the past 2 years, on and off, working on this story based off a choice that one character did during the game. So the first game it was 3 of my friends. One of them wasn't able to make it when we started another game because she was dating one of my players. They broke up, so now it was one of the other players' wives joined in, and she took over that character and played it totally different to the point where the entire world ended up the way it is because of her actions. I'll go in depth on what that story was maybe in a later video. I'm still trying to piece together all the notes that I had on it. But needless to say, based off the one massive thing a player did, I was able to create a new, entirely different story and just generate this whole world off of one simple action, and then base it off stuff that I have interest in. So aside from all we're rambling, basically what I'm trying to say is, don't be intimidated about taking up the mantle as a DM. It's daunting, but if you are quick on your feet and you can kind of like fudge your way about a few things, then you should be golden. Because let's be fair, anybody who's looked at the 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons DM guide book, whatever, it's a little daunting. It's a lot of pages, but for the most part, there's maybe only like, okay, I'm gonna get hate for this one, but personally I feel that maybe half that book is a lot of fluff. There's really not a lot in there you need to play 5th ed. They stripped it down a lot. Because when the first time I ever DM'd, I was like 13, 14. It was the 3rd edition starter box. And it was for my brother, who's 2 years younger than me. He was like 10, 11 at the time. And one of our family friends. And we just did a quick dungeon crawl. And I kind of knew what I was doing, but I didn't because I just got it. So it was like, just kind of how I started. Nobody's ever going to start being an amazing DM. And even I'll admit, I'm not an amazing DM. I just know how to bullshit really well. But what you can do is you can hone your craft and eventually become an amazing DM. Like, you look at people like Matt Mercer and you're like, that's what I want to be. Like, the whole reason why I really got into like adding more voices to my game is because of watching some of Matt Mercer's games, because he does it fantastically. That, and my mom does really bad British accents, so I always have to one-up her. But anyway, yeah, that's it. Hopefully next time I stammer less and don't say so many times. But for now, thank you to the probably 2 or 3 people who are going to watch this. I hope it helped. Have yourself a great night, and I'll catch you later.